Jon Bernthal, who played the Punisher over on the Netflix Marvel TV side of things, talks about returning to Marvel Studios as the Punisher, and he says that there's a few things that have to happen if he's going to return. So this came from a recent interview with Forbes' Scott King, where Jon Bernthal was talking about being one of the stars of the recently released Sopranos prequel over on HBO Max and in theaters. And he was asked about the future of a potential return as the Punisher, aka Frank Castle, to Marvel Studios. And honestly, he got, for once, really open about talking about a return and not just sort of ignoring it and what it would take to bring him back. And he says that if there is a way to do it, if they are going to do it, and if the opportunity shows up, he does have a couple of, I guess you could call them demands. First and foremost, he says that he wants to do it right, and that involves violence and grittiness. It has to be gritty enough to be able to sustain a character like the Punisher where he's not being held back. If they can do that and figure that way out, he would be willing to do it, and he would love to get back to it and be the Punisher again. So this is one of those things where you have to be careful with what you perceive as violence and gritty and do it right. Because I will argue that Netflix with the Punisher was pretty much as perfect as you get with the Punisher. I do appreciate all the previous attempts, but they were all over the place. The Lundgren version was a very early prototype for what could be a Punisher. Tom Jane was a unique take that's very nostalgically looked back upon with fondness, but it missed the mark. Warzone, very much a grindhouse Punisher of the time, let's go overboard, but it missed the mark. When they tried to characterize the Punisher and make him more human, I think they nailed it with Netflix. And the violence served the story. The violence wasn't just there to be there. And I think if they could recapture that again and make it seem like it belongs there and it works in the context of the story, I think there's something there. And maybe they've already pitched it. Maybe we have to wait and see how Moon Knight looks in terms of violence to see what they could do. But again, I don't think there's anything to hold back in regards to what the Punisher can do in a Disney Plus type of scenario, or even some sort of, crossover in the MCU, because he's not overly violent as people think when you look back on the Netflix thing. Like, there is violence there, but it's not what people perceive as the Punisher doing all the time, which is like, the most horrendous stuff from the comics. That stuff is pretty much kept to a minimum even in the comics now. So I think as a modern version, the Netflix version of the character would work in a Disney context because, it fits that mold. It already felt like it was part of the MCU, just, more grounded, less superhero. For the love of God, you guys literally put him in the War Machine armor for an incredible comic book arc. Literally just do that. That is literally all you need to do, and it would be perfect.